I'm Morgan Wilson, 32 years old, and my entire life I've been second best to my sister Rebecca. The overlooked daughter, the afterthought, the quiet one, who never needed attention, at least according to my parents. What they never realized was that while they were busy focusing on my sister's every achievement, I was quietly building an empire. When Rebecca discovered last month that I'd sold my tech startup for $15 million, she had a meltdown so spectacular it finally exposed 30 years of family dysfunction. Before I tell you how it all unraveled, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from, hit subscribe, and stick around to see how I went from invisible daughter to the family member they couldn't ignore anymore. My earliest memories are shadowed by the constant reminder that Rebecca was special and I was, well, just there. I was 5 when I first noticed it. My kindergarten teacher had called home to praise my reading abilities. I was already devouring chapter books while my classmates were still learning the alphabet. That same evening, Rebecca scored a goal in her soccer game. My parents took the family out for ice cream to celebrate her achievement. My teacher's call wasn't mentioned. Our childhood home in suburban Michigan was essentially a shrine to Rebecca. The walls were lined with her trophies, medals, and photos. Rebecca was pretty, outgoing, and athletic, everything my introverted, bookish self wasn't. She had my mother's blonde hair and my father's charming smile, while I inherited my grandmother's auburn curls and serious expression. I often wondered if my parents saw themselves in Rebecca, which made it easier to love her more. For birthdays, Rebecca's celebrations were elaborate affairs with themed decorations, custom cakes, and dozens of guests. My parents would spend weeks planning, ensuring every detail was perfect. By contrast, my birthdays were often an afterthought, a store-bought cake, a few hastily wrapped presents, and maybe a dinner at my favorite restaurant, which was actually Rebecca's favorite, but no one noticed the difference. Rebecca just needs more attention, my mother would explain whenever I gathered the courage to ask why my sister got new clothes while I got hand-me-downs, or why they attended all her soccer games, but missed my science fair where I won first place. She's more sensitive than you are, Morgan. You're so independent, you're fine on your own. By age 8, I had accepted this as normal and found refuge in books, and later, computers. The basement became my sanctuary, where I would read for hours, or play with our old desktop computer that nobody else used. While Rebecca received the latest toys and gadgets, I learned to fix and upgrade that ancient computer, sparking my interest in technology. My grandmother, my father's mother, was the only one who seemed to see me. Grandma Helen lived just 20 minutes away, and would often pick me up for special days that were just for us. She was a retired accountant, who had raised 3 children on her own after my grandfather died young. Unlike my parents, she valued education, persistence, and financial independence. Your sister might be the shooting star, Morgan, but you're the North Star, constant, reliable, and ultimately more useful for finding your way, she told me once while we were baking cookies in her kitchen. I was 9, and it was the first time anyone had suggested I might have value beyond being Rebecca's quiet sister. It was Grandma Helen who taught me about investing and saving. When I was 10, she helped me open a savings account with the $20 I'd earned helping her neighbor weed her garden. Money is freedom, Morgan, she explained. Save a little of everything you earn, and one day you'll have options that others don't. My parents never asked what Grandma Helen and I did during our time together. They were too busy driving Rebecca to dance recitals, soccer tournaments, and play dates. I think they were simply relieved to have one less child to worry about on those days. The first time I realized our family dynamic wasn't normal was when I was 11. My friend Zoe came over after school, and as we walked through the living room, she stopped to look at the family photos. "Where are you in these pictures?" she asked, scanning the frames filled with images of Rebecca. There was a family vacation photo where I was barely visible in the background, a Christmas portrait where Rebecca sat on Santa's lap while I stood awkwardly to the side, and countless solo shots of my sister in various poses and activities. I'm there, I pointed to the edges of several photos. See? Zoe frowned. That's weird. At my house, we have the same number of pictures of everyone. That night, I looked around our house with new eyes and counted 43 framed photos of Rebecca. 7 that included me, none that featured me alone. It was a visual representation of where I stood in the family hierarchy. School became my refuge. My teachers appreciated my intelligence and work ethic in ways my parents never did. While Rebecca struggled to maintain B-minuses, which were celebrated with enthusiasm, I consistently earned perfect grades, which were met with a distracted, "That's nice, honey." By the time I was 12, I had stopped sharing my accomplishments at home. When I won the regional spelling bee, I didn't even mention it. When I was selected for an advanced summer math program, I forged my mother's signature on the permission slip and told her it was for a field trip. What was the point of telling them? They'd either miss it for one of Rebecca's events, or diminish it somehow. Grandma Helen remained my cheerleader. She attended every academic competition, awards ceremony, and school event she could. She kept a photo album filled with pictures of me and my achievements, a parallel universe where I was the star. "I'm documenting your journey," she would say with a wink. "Someday, everyone will see what I see in you." The summer I turned 13, Rebecca broke her arm falling from a cheerleading pyramid. For 2 months, our entire household revolved around her recovery. My parents took turns staying home from work to care for her. They bought her new video games to keep her entertained and ordered takeout from her favorite restaurants nearly every night. During this same period, I won a statewide essay contest with a scholarship prize that would be held in trust for my college education. I told only Grandma Helen, who took me out for a fancy dinner to celebrate. "Your time is coming," she promised. "Build your foundation brick by brick, and no one will be able to ignore what you've created." I decided then that if my family couldn't see my value, I would find people who could. I would build something so significant that being overlooked would no longer be an option. It wasn't about revenge or showing them up. It was about creating a life where I was defined by my own achievements rather than by my relation to Rebecca. Little did I know how thoroughly I would succeed in this mission, or how dramatically it would ultimately force my family to confront the dynamic they had created. High school widened the gap between Rebecca and me even further. She was elected homecoming queen, dated the quarterback, and maintained her position at the center of the popular crowd. I was the quiet girl who aced AP classes, led the debate team, and spent lunches in the computer lab teaching myself to code. My parents never missed Rebecca's football games, where she cheered on the sidelines in her blue and gold uniform. They threw parties for her and her friends after every home game, our house filled with the laughter and chaos of teenagers celebrating another social victory. Meanwhile, I was winning debate tournaments and math competitions across the state. My computer science teacher, Mr. Reeves, had taken me under his wing after discovering that I'd taught myself basic programming. He gave me access to the computer lab before and after school, and encouraged me to enter technology competitions. When I qualified for the national debate tournament in my sophomore year, my parents committed to attending, until Rebecca's regular season soccer game was rescheduled for the same weekend. "You understand, right, Morgan?" my mother said, not really asking a question. "This is an important game for Rebecca's college recruitment. You'll be fine on your own, you always are." I did go alone. Mr. Reeves drove me and 2 other students to the tournament 3 states away. I won second place nationally and earned a $5,000 scholarship. When I returned home, my parents were hosting a cookout celebrating Rebecca's team winning their game. "How was your debate thing?" my father asked as he flipped burgers. "It was fine," I answered, carrying my trophy and certificate to my room where they joined others in my closet, away from the shrine to Rebecca that was our home. The pattern continued throughout high school. Rebecca's B+ in chemistry was celebration-worthy because science is so hard for her, and she really tried. My perfect score on the SAT was acknowledged with a distracted, "That's nice," as my mother scrolled through photos of Rebecca's latest soccer tournament on her phone. The pivotal moment came during our senior year. Rebecca and I were in the same graduating class, as she'd been held back in 3rd grade due to social readiness issues, which really meant my parents couldn't bear the thought of her not being at the top of every social hierarchy. I was named valedictorian, which meant I would be giving a speech at graduation. The ceremony was scheduled for 2 p.m. on a Saturday in May. 2 weeks before graduation, Rebecca's soccer team made it to a regional tournament, not even a championship, just a regular tournament game, scheduled for the same day. I overheard my parents discussing it in the kitchen. "We can't miss Rebecca's game," my mother insisted. "College scouts will be there. This could determine her future." "But Morgan is giving a speech," my father said, showing a rare moment of consideration for my achievement. "Morgan will understand. She always does. And honestly, those valedictorian speeches are all the same anyway. We can watch the school's recording later." They didn't tell me their decision, they just didn't show up at graduation. I stood at the podium, delivering a speech about perseverance and finding your own path, scanning the audience for familiar faces. Grandma Helen was there in the front row, beaming with pride. My parents' seats were empty. That night, when they returned home jubilant about Rebecca's game-winning goal, her team had won 2-1. I had already packed a suitcase. I was leaving for a summer coding internship in Seattle the next morning, an opportunity I'd secured through Mr. Ree's connections. 3 months is a long time to be away, my mother commented when I mentioned my departure over dinner. "Won't you miss your sister's summer tournaments?" I looked at her for a long moment, wondering if she could hear herself. "I doubt it," I finally said. That summer internship changed my life. Working at a small but innovative tech company, I found myself surrounded by people who valued the very qualities my family had always overlooked. My attention to detail, my persistence, my ability to solve complex problems, these were assets, not afterthoughts. When I returned home for 2 weeks before leaving for Stanford, on a nearly full scholarship, there was a distance between my family and me that went beyond the physical separation of the summer. I had glimpsed a world where I fit in, where I was valued, and I couldn't unsee it. The night before I left for college, Grandma Helen invited me to dinner at her house. She served my favorite meal and gave me a small wooden box. "Open it when you're alone in your dorm room," she instructed. "And remember the promise you're making me tonight." "What promise?" I asked. "Promise me you'll build your own life, not the one they expect, not even the one I expect. Build the life that makes you feel seen." I promised. The next day, my parents drove me to the airport, Rebecca complaining the entire time about missing her friend's pool party for my boring college drop-off. When they hugged me goodbye, it felt like they were already mentally driving back home, back to the daughter who really mattered. In my dorm room that night, I opened Grandma Helen's box. Inside was $5,000 in cash, a handwritten letter, and a silver necklace with a North Star pendant. "For emergencies, for opportunities, or for whatever freedom you need to purchase," her letter read. "The money is a tool. The star is a reminder. You will find your way, Morgan. And someday, they'll all look up and realize they've been orbiting you all along." I wore that necklace every day of college. It was still around my neck the day I sold my company for $15 million. Stanford was everything I'd hoped for and more. For the first time in my life, I was surrounded by people who thought like me, driven, curious, and passionate about creating something meaningful. No one knew me as Rebecca's sister, or the quiet one. I was just Morgan, the girl from Michigan, who could code like she was born speaking the language. My parents called once every 2 weeks, usually with Rebecca also on the line, monopolizing the conversation with updates about her soccer games, or sorority drama, at the state university she attended on a partial athletic scholarship. They rarely asked about my classes or projects, and when they did, their eyes would glaze over as soon as I mentioned algorithms or programming languages. During my freshman year, I met Jason Chen in my advanced computer science class. We were paired for a project, and our coding styles complemented each other perfectly. Where I was methodical and precise, he was creative and intuitive. We pulled an all-nighter to finish our assignment, and by morning, we'd not only completed the required work, but also developed a prototype for an app that would help students find study partners based on their schedules and learning styles. "We should actually build this," Jason said as we stumbled out of the computer lab, bleary-eyed but exhilarated. "We should," I agreed, and StudySync was born. We spent our sophomore year developing the app between classes and on weekends. When we launched it at Stanford, it spread across campus like wildfire. Within a month, half the student body was using it. By the end of the semester, 3 other universities had reached out about implementing it on their campuses. Jason and I formed an LLC, charged a small licensing fee to the schools, and reinvested every penny into improving the app. By the end of our junior year, StudySync was generating enough revenue to fund our next idea, a more ambitious project called Connected, a platform that would link students directly with industry professionals for mentorship and project collaboration. During winter break of my junior year, I went home to Michigan for a week. The dynamic hadn't changed. Rebecca, who was struggling in her classes and had been benched due to a knee injury, was still the center of attention. My parents had converted the basement, my old sanctuary, into a recovery space for her, complete with a new TV and gaming system to keep her entertained while she did physical therapy. "And what about your little computer project?" my father asked during dinner one night. "Is that still a hobby you're doing?" "It's not a hobby, Dad. It's a business. We're in talks with 12 universities now, and we're developing a new platform." "That's nice," my mother said, patting my hand. "Rebecca, tell Morgan about the internship you're applying for." I spent the rest of the break with Grandma Helen, who asked detailed questions about my business and listened intently to my answers. She was now in her 70s, but as sharp as ever. She had been investing the modest income from her pension, and had done surprisingly well. "I've been following the advice I gave you," she said with a wink. "A little money, smartly invested, can grow into something significant." That summer, while Rebecca was at home finding herself, after her junior year, I interned at a major tech company in Silicon Valley. The experience was invaluable, giving me insight into how large tech corporations operated, and more importantly, where their blind spots were, the gaps my future company could fill. When I returned to Stanford for my senior year, Jason and I were already mapping out our post-graduation plans. Connected was gaining traction, and we had caught the attention of a few angel investors who saw potential in our vision. In November of my senior year, Grandma Helen passed away unexpectedly from a stroke. It was the first time I had experienced real grief, a pain so profound it felt physical. I flew home for the funeral, numb with shock and loss. At the service, I was asked to speak about her. As I stood at the podium, I saw my parents in the front row, my mother dabbing at dry eyes while checking her watch. Rebecca was scrolling through her phone until my father nudged her to put it away. Grandma Helen saw people for who they truly were, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. She didn't just love you, she understood you. She taught me that being seen, truly seen, is perhaps the greatest gift one person can give another. After the service, the family gathered at my parents' house. I overheard Rebecca complaining about missing a party to attend, some boring funeral. I escaped to the front porch, clutching the North Star necklace that now felt like my only connection to the one person who had truly known me. The lawyer called me the following week. Grandma Helen had left me $50,000, her entire savings. The note attached to the will read simply, "For the North Star. Build something that lasts." I graduated from Stanford with honors that spring. My parents attended the ceremony, but left immediately after to get back for Rebecca's sorority formal the next day. They hadn't bothered to learn that I was being recognized as one of the top students in the computer science department, with a job offer from one of the most prestigious tech firms in the country. I took the job, moved into a modest apartment in San Francisco with 2 roommates, and lived well below my means despite my comfortable salary. Every month, I put aside 40% of my income, building a financial cushion that would eventually become my startup fund. The $50,000 from Grandma Helen was invested conservatively, growing steadily as I waited for the right moment. Meanwhile, I continued developing side projects with Jason on evenings and weekends. We built small apps, experimented with new technologies, and refined our vision for what would eventually become NeuroNet. An AI-driven platform that would revolutionize how businesses processed and analyzed customer feedback. "We're sitting on something big here," Jason said one night as we reviewed our prototype. "This could change everything." He was right, though neither of us knew just how right at the time. 3 years into my corporate job, I had saved enough to provide myself a 1-year runway with no income. Combined with Grandma Helen's inheritance, which had grown to nearly $70,000, I had the seed money to take a chance on NeuroNet. When I called my parents to tell them I was quitting my secure job to launch a startup, their response was predictable. "Is that really wise, Morgan?" my mother asked. "You have such good benefits there." "Rebecca just got promoted to assistant manager at the gym," my father added, as if this were relevant to my career decision. "She's finally finding her footing." "I'm sure Morgan will be fine if this computer thing doesn't work out," my mother said. "She can always go back to a regular job." Speaking of Rebecca, did we tell you she's dating the regional director now? He might be the one. I ended the call and didn't discuss my business with them again. Jason and I worked out of his garage for the first 6 months, surviving on ramen noodles and determination. We built the initial version of NeuroNet, a sophisticated AI system that could analyze customer feedback across multiple channels, social media, email, surveys, calls, and provide businesses with actionable insights about customer sentiment and product performance. Our breakthrough came when a mid-sized tech company agreed to pilot our system. Their enthusiastic feedback and the measurable improvements in their customer retention got us noticed. Soon, we were pitching to venture capitalists. I'll never forget our first successful funding round. We secured $1.5 million in exchange for 15% of the company. That night, Jason and I celebrated with champagne on the roof of our new, still modest, office space. To Grandma Helen, I toasted, touching my North Star necklace. To Grandma Helen, Jason echoed, though he'd never met her. "She must have been remarkable to have raised someone like you." The next 3 years were a blur of 80-hour work weeks, technical challenges, and growth milestones. We expanded our team from 2 to 20, then to 50. Our client base grew from 1 pilot customer to over 100 businesses ranging from startups to Fortune 500 companies. There were setbacks, of course. A competing product launched that temporarily stalled our growth. A key team member left, taking valuable knowledge to a rival firm. Our servers crashed during a major client presentation. But each crisis taught us something, and we emerged stronger. Throughout this time, I maintained minimal contact with my family. I visited Michigan once or twice a year, usually around holidays, where conversations still revolved around Rebecca. She had cycled through several jobs, relationships, and living situations, never staying with anything long enough to build something substantial. "Rebecca's having a tough time," my mother would explain during my visits. "Her boss doesn't appreciate her talents, or that apartment was beneath her standards, or that man wasn't good enough for her." What they never mentioned, during these updates, was that they were constantly bailing Rebecca out financially. I discovered this accidentally during Christmas dinner my second year of running Neuronet, when my father mentioned in passing the loan they had given Rebecca to cover her credit card debt. "How much have you loaned her?" I asked. My parents exchanged uncomfortable glances. "It's what parents do," my mother finally said. "When your child needs help, you help." I wondered if that principle applied to all children, or just to Rebecca, but I kept the thought to myself. During one visit, Rebecca asked what I actually did all day with computers. When I tried to explain Neuronet, she interrupted. "Sounds boring. And honestly, kind of nerdy, Morgan. But I guess that's always been your thing." She had no idea that my thing had created a company valued at over $30 million in its latest funding round, or that I was living well below my means while my net worth grew exponentially. I had never discussed money or business valuation with my family, and they had never thought to ask. In our 5th year, Neuronet developed a new feature that could predict customer behavior with unprecedented accuracy. The market response was immediate and enthusiastic. Our user base tripled in 6 months, and suddenly we were being courted by major tech companies interested in acquisition. The offers started around $5 million and quickly escalated as multiple companies entered the bidding war. Jason and I spent countless hours with lawyers and financial advisors, weighing our options, calculating valuations, and negotiating terms. When the final offer came in at $15 million, we knew it was time to sell. We had built something valuable, made a significant impact in our industry, and now had the opportunity to reward ourselves and our early team members while gaining the resources to eventually build something new. The day we signed the acquisition papers, Jason and I sat alone in our office after everyone else had left to celebrate. "Did you ever imagine this when we were pulling all-nighters at Stanford?" he asked. I touched my North Star necklace. Yes and no. I always knew we'd build something meaningful. I just didn't know it would change our lives this dramatically. "What are you going to do with your share?" Jason was planning to travel the world for a year before starting his next venture. "I don't know yet," I answered honestly. "But I think it's time to stop living like a starving student." I had no idea that my decision to finally enjoy some of my wealth would set off a chain reaction that would force my family to confront 30 years of dysfunctional dynamics. The news broke on a Tuesday. TechCrunch published an article about the acquisition, mentioning both Jason and me by name and the $15 million figure. Within hours, it was picked up by several other tech publications, and even made it to the business section of a few mainstream news outlets. I hadn't planned to tell my family this way. In fact, I hadn't planned to tell them at all, at least not the specific dollar amount. I figured I'd eventually mention that I'd done well with the company sale and leave it at that. But the universe had other plans. My phone rang at 7:30 that evening. It was my mother, her voice unusually animated. "Morgan, why didn't you tell us about your company? Mrs. Abernathy from next door just sent me a link about you selling some computer thing for millions. Is that true?" I took a deep breath. Yes, it's true. We finalized the acquisition yesterday. Well, this is just incredible. Your father and I are so proud. You must come home this weekend for dinner. We need to celebrate. In all my 32 years, my mother had never once suggested a family dinner to celebrate my accomplishments. The sudden interest was jarring. I'll check my schedule, I said non-committally. My father called the next day, then Rebecca the day after that. The family that had barely managed to remember my birthday for the past decade was suddenly very interested in my life. I agreed to dinner that Saturday, more out of curiosity than familial obligation. I flew to Michigan and checked into a hotel rather than staying at my parents' house, a decision that prompted a hurt call from my mother. But we have your old room ready, she protested. You mean Rebecca's second closet? I replied, referring to the way my childhood bedroom had been repurposed to store Rebecca's overflow of clothes and sports equipment when she moved back home after college. Well, we've cleared that out now, my mother said, missing the point entirely. The dinner started awkwardly. My parents had prepared an elaborate meal, far more effort than they'd ever put into any dinner when I was growing up. Rebecca arrived late, as was her custom, making a dramatic entrance in a new dress that still had the tags partially tucked in at the neckline. There's my genius sister, she exclaimed, hugging me with unusual enthusiasm. The secret millionaire among us. My father opened an expensive bottle of champagne, the good stuff for our successful daughter. And my mother kept heaping food on my plate, urging me to eat up, you're too thin. The conversation was surreal. My parents asked detailed questions about my company, my job, my apartment in San Francisco, all topics they had shown zero interest in during our infrequent calls over the years. Rebecca was uncharacteristically quiet through the first part of the meal, watching this performance with narrowed eyes. When she did speak, her questions had a sharp edge. So how much do you actually have, Morgan? The article said $15 million, but that can't be right, can it? The company sold for that amount, I replied carefully. After investors and taxes, my personal share is less. But still millions, she pressed. I nodded, taking a sip of champagne. That's just. I mean, it's crazy, Rebecca continued. You're the rich one now. Little Morgan with her computers. There was something in her tone, a mixture of disbelief and resentment, that made me set down my glass. It's not crazy at all, Rebecca. I've been building this company for 7 years. While the rest of us were living real lives, she muttered. My father cleared his throat. Now, Rebecca, your sister has worked very hard. Oh, now she's your sister. Rebecca interrupted, her voice rising. Now that she's rich, suddenly Morgan matters. That's convenient. My mother gasped. Rebecca. What a horrible thing to say. Is it, Mom? Really? Rebecca's face had flushed red. For 30 years, it's been the Rebecca show in this family. You know it, I know it, Morgan definitely knows it. And now she comes home with millions of dollars, and suddenly you're acting like she's always been your precious daughter. It's bullshit. Language, Rebecca, my father admonished weakly. Rebecca ignored him, her eyes fixed on me. Did you do this on purpose? Did you keep it secret all these years, just so you could come back and show us all up? Not everything is about you, Rebecca, I said quietly. I built my company because it was important to me. I didn't discuss it with you because none of you ever showed any interest. Well, they're interested now, Rebecca said with a bitter laugh. Now that you're loaded. I bet they're already thinking about all the ways you can help out the family. My parents' uncomfortable expressions confirmed Rebecca's accusation. My mother recovered first. Well, family helps family, she said, reaching across the table to pat my hand. And now that you're so successful, I'm sure you'll want to share your blessings. Rebecca's been having some financial difficulties with her car loan, and your father and I are looking at refinancing the house. Of course, I said, pulling my hand away. Family helps family. Like all those times you helped me with college applications. Or came to my debate competitions. Or called to check on me during my first year of running a startup, when I was working 80 hours a week and living on cup noodles. A heavy silence fell over the table. My mother looked stricken. That's not fair, Morgan, my father finally said. We always supported you. How exactly did you support me, Dad? He opened his mouth, then closed it again, unable to provide a specific example. Rebecca pushed back from the table. This is just perfect. Little Morgan the millionaire, making us all feel like crap, because we didn't worship her enough growing up. That's not what I'm doing, I said. No. Then what's with the guilt trip? So we paid more attention to me when we were kids. So what? I needed it. You were always fine on your own, everyone said so. I wasn't fine, I said, my voice steady despite the emotion welling up inside me. I was neglected. There's a difference. Oh, poor neglected Morgan with her fancy degree and her millions of dollars, Rebecca spat. You've always been selfish, you know that. Always judging the rest of us, because we weren't perfect like you. Rebecca, that's enough, my father interjected. No, it's not enough. Rebecca was shouting now. She comes back here flaunting her money, making us feel small, and you're taking her side. After everything you've done for me, now you're Team Morgan, because she's rich. No one is taking sides, my mother pleaded. Yes, you are. You're all suddenly Morgan fans, because she hit the jackpot. Well, guess what? She wouldn't even have that money if it weren't for me. I raised an eyebrow. How do you figure that, Rebecca? If I hadn't been the center of attention, you wouldn't have had your little motivation to prove yourself. You should be thanking me. The sheer audacity of her statement left me momentarily speechless. Then, to everyone's surprise, including my own, I laughed. It wasn't a bitter laugh, or a mocking one. It was genuine amusement at the absurdity of the situation. You know what? You might actually be right about that part, I said, standing up and placing my napkin on the table. So thank you, Rebecca. Thank you all for showing me exactly what I didn't want my life to be. It was the greatest gift you could have given me. I walked to the door, pausing with my hand on the knob. And for the record, I don't owe any of you anything. Not explanations, not money, not guilt. I built my life despite this family, not because of it. I left to the sound of Rebecca's angry sobs, and my mother calling my name. In my rental car, I sat for a moment, expecting to feel grief or rage or some overwhelming emotion. Instead, I felt lighter than I had in years, as if I'd finally put down a heavy burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. My phone started buzzing with texts before I reached the hotel. First from my mother. Please come back. Rebecca didn't mean it. We're so proud of you. Then my father. This is a misunderstanding. Family should stick together. And finally, most predictably, Rebecca. You think you're so much better than us with your fancy company and your millions. You've always been a stuck-up bitch. Have fun with your money since you don't need family. I turned off my phone, ordered room service, and for the first time in my adult life, allowed myself to eat an expensive meal without calculating how many hours of work it represented, or how much I could have invested that money for the future. As I ate, I realized I was at a crossroads. I could continue the pattern, trying to prove my worth to people who would never truly see me. Or I could accept that my family was who they were, set appropriate boundaries, and focus on building a life that made me happy. The choice, when framed that way, wasn't difficult at all. The week following the confrontation was chaotic. After returning to San Francisco, I turned my phone back on to find 27 missed calls and 43 text messages from my family. The texts ranged from angry accusations, mostly from Rebecca, to tearful apologies, my mother, to awkward attempts at mediation, my father. I didn't respond immediately. Instead, I made an appointment with Dr. Levine, a therapist I had started seeing shortly after selling the company. I had initially sought therapy to help navigate the emotional impact of sudden wealth, the guilt, the imposter syndrome, the anxiety about making the right decisions. Now I needed guidance on something far more complex: setting boundaries with the family that had shaped my deepest insecurities. What do you actually want from your relationship with your family going forward? Dr. Levine asked during our session. The question stopped me short. I had spent so many years trying to earn their attention and approval that I had never considered what kind of relationship I wanted on my own terms. I don't want to cut them off completely, I said after a long pause. But I can't go back to being the invisible daughter, especially now that they're only interested because of my money. Those aren't the only two options, Dr. Levine pointed out. You can create a new dynamic, but it requires clear boundaries and consistent enforcement. Over the next few sessions, we worked on identifying what those boundaries would look like. No discussions of loans or financial help without proper documentation and repayment plans. No more accepting dismissive treatment or comparisons to Rebecca. No more one-sided relationships where I gave emotional support but received none in return. Meanwhile, I consulted with a financial advisor about wealth management. She helped me create a comprehensive plan that would protect my assets while allowing me to be strategically generous in ways that aligned with my values. You earned this money, she reminded me. You get to decide how to use it. After 2 weeks of reflection and planning, I finally responded to my family. I sent an email to my parents, explaining that I needed space to process what had happened and that when I was ready to reconnect, our relationship would need to look different than it had in the past. I outlined my boundaries clearly and explained the consequences if they weren't respected. To Rebecca, I sent a shorter message. I hope you find whatever it is you're looking for. I'm not your competition or your bank account. When you're ready to have a relationship based on mutual respect, let me know. My parents responded within hours, full of apologies and promises to do better. Rebecca didn't respond at all, but posted several thinly veiled references to fake people with their blood money on social media. A week later, my parents suggested meeting on neutral ground to talk things through. We met at a restaurant halfway between their home and the airport before my flight back to San Francisco. The conversation was uncomfortable but necessary. My father, to his credit, acknowledged that they had treated me differently from Rebecca throughout our childhood. We thought you didn't need the attention she did, he explained. You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. Children shouldn't have to earn attention by being needy, I replied. And being labeled the strong one doesn't mean I didn't need support. My mother had a harder time accepting her role in the dynamic. We gave you both what you needed, she insisted. Different children need different things. What I needed was to be seen, Mom. Not just when I have something you want, but all the time. That's what every child needs. By the end of the meal, we had reached a fragile understanding. They wouldn't ask for money, though I could tell the restraint was costing them, and I would maintain contact, but with clearer boundaries about how I expected to be treated. As for Rebecca, she alternated between cold silence and passive-aggressive jabs on social media. When she finally did reach out a month later, it was with a proposal for me to invest in a fitness app she wanted to develop, despite having no experience in technology or business. "I think it would be healing for us to work together as sisters," she wrote. "And with your money and my creativity, we could make millions more." I declined politely but firmly, suggesting that if she was serious about app development, she should take some coding classes and build a prototype first. She responded by blocking me on all social media platforms. During this turbulent period, I found unexpected support from my chosen family, friends like Jason, colleagues from Neuronet, and even a few former professors who had become mentors. They reminded me that family isn't just about blood, it's about who shows up for you consistently. 3 months after the confrontation, I made a decision about my inheritance from Grandma Helen. I established a scholarship fund in her name at my old high school, specifically for students interested in computer science who demonstrated financial need and academic promise. The annual award would cover full college tuition plus a stipend for living expenses, the kind of support that could change a young person's life trajectory. I also anonymously set up education funds for my cousin's children. My cousin Emma had always been kind to me growing up, and I wanted her kids to have opportunities regardless of their parents' financial situation. The money was placed in trusts that could only be accessed for educational purposes, with no way to trace them back to me. These acts of generosity brought me more joy than any luxury purchase could have. They honored Grandma Helen's memory and values while creating ripples of opportunity that would extend far beyond my immediate circle. As for my own life, I began to emerge from the shadow of my family's dynamics. I bought a comfortable, but not ostentatious condo in San Francisco with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a view of the bay. I took my first real vacation in 7 years, 3 weeks in Japan, exploring temples and technology hubs alike. I started dating again, cautiously opening myself to the possibility of connection with someone who valued me for who I was, not what I could provide. 6 months after the confrontation dinner, I received a letter from my mother. Unlike her emails and texts, which tended to be reactive and emotional, the letter was thoughtful and seemed genuinely reflective. "I've been seeing a therapist," she wrote. "She's helping me understand how my own upbringing affected how I parented you and Rebecca. I'm not offering this as an excuse, just as context. I'm trying to learn, even at my age. I hope someday you can forgive me for not seeing you clearly when you were growing up. I see you now, Morgan. I'm proud of the woman you've become, and I know that's despite, not because of, how we raised you." It wasn't a perfect apology, but it was a start. I wrote back, sharing a little about my life and my own therapy journey. We began a tentative correspondence that felt more honest than any communication we'd had throughout my childhood. With Rebecca, the path to reconciliation was less clear. Her resentment seemed to deepen rather than diminish with time. According to my parents, she had quit her latest job and was taking time to find herself again, a phrase that had become code for between crises. I didn't reach out to her directly, respecting the boundary she had established by blocking me. But I did ask my parents to let her know that when she was ready to talk without financial expectations, I would be open to rebuilding our relationship as equals. Whether that day would ever come remained to be seen. In the meantime, I was learning that forgiveness didn't require reconciliation, and healing didn't depend on others acknowledging the hurt they'd caused. I could move forward regardless of whether my family dynamics ever fully changed. One evening, as I stood on my balcony watching the sunset over the bay, I touched the North Star necklace that still hung around my neck. For the first time, I truly understood what Grandma Helen had meant all those years ago. The North Star wasn't just constant and reliable, it helped others find their way. Perhaps that was my path now, to use what I had built and learned to help others navigate their own journeys. With that thought, I felt a sense of peace settle over me. Not the resignation I had often mistaken for acceptance in my childhood, but a genuine tranquility born of self-knowledge and purpose. I had found my own way, just as I had promised Grandma Helen I would. And in doing so, I had discovered that being seen by others matters far less than truly seeing yourself. 6 months after the confrontation that exposed 30 years of family dysfunction, my life had transformed in ways I couldn't have anticipated. The financial freedom from selling Neuronet had opened doors, but the emotional freedom that came from finally confronting the family dynamics that had shaped me was the true liberation. I had established a new normal with my parents, limited but structured contact that protected my boundaries while allowing for the possibility of a healthier relationship. We spoke every other Sunday, conversations that were sometimes awkward but increasingly authentic. They had not asked for money again, though I occasionally sensed the question hovering unspoken when they mentioned home repairs or medical bills. Rebecca remained distant. From what my parents shared, she was still struggling, jumping between jobs, relationships, and grand schemes that never materialized. She had moved back home, temporarily, after breaking up with her latest boyfriend, a pattern that had repeated throughout her 20s. I had sent her a birthday card with a simple message: "I hope this year brings you peace and purpose. When you're ready to talk, I'm here." She hadn't responded, but my mother mentioned that she had kept the card on her nightstand, which I chose to interpret as a small opening. My own life had blossomed in unexpected ways. After years of pouring all my energy into work, I had discovered the joy of balance. I still consulted with tech companies 3 days a week, keeping my skills sharp and my mind engaged. But I also volunteered teaching coding to middle school girls, took ceramics classes, and had even adopted a rescue dog named Einstein, who had become my loyal companion. More significantly, I had begun dating Michael, an environmental lawyer I met at a charity event. Unlike previous relationships that had fizzled under the demands of my startup schedule, this one was flourishing. Michael saw me, truly saw me, in a way that echoed how Grandma Helen had. He celebrated my successes, without defining me by them, and supported me through moments of doubt, without trying to fix everything. "I like who I am when I'm with you," he told me one evening as we walked Einstein along the beach. "You make me want to be my best self." I realized I felt the same way about him. A healthy interdependence, so different from the dysfunction I'd grown up with. The scholarship fund in Grandma Helen's name had selected its first recipient, a brilliant young woman named Aisha, who reminded me of myself at that age. I had attended the award ceremony anonymously, sitting in the back of the auditorium and blinking back tears as Aisha accepted the scholarship that would change her life trajectory. Her parents had beamed with pride, taking photos and cheering loudly when her name was called, the kind of support I had craved but never received. One Sunday in early autumn, my regular call with my parents took an unexpected turn. "We've been doing some thinking," my father said, his voice uncharacteristically hesitant. "About how we treated you and Rebecca growing up." My mother joined in. "We've realized, with help from our therapist, that we created an unhealthy dynamic. We favored Rebecca because she demanded attention, and we took you for granted because you didn't. We're trying to change that with Rebecca now," my father continued. "Setting boundaries, not rushing in to solve her problems. It's not going well, to be honest. She's angry that we're not handling things the way we used to." "That makes sense," I said. "Change is hard, especially when it threatens a pattern that's benefited you." "We owe you an apology, Morgan," my mother said. "A real one, not the kind we gave before when we were just reacting to the situation. We're sorry for not giving you the attention and support you deserved. For making you feel invisible in your own family. You shouldn't have had to become a millionaire to get our attention." The apology wasn't perfect, but it was sincere, a genuine acknowledgement of the pattern that had defined my childhood. I felt a knot of tension I hadn't realized I was carrying begin to loosen. "Thank you for saying that," I replied. "It means a lot to hear you acknowledge it." After the call, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights flicker on as dusk settled over San Francisco. I thought about the long journey that had brought me here, from the overlooked child to the successful entrepreneur to the woman I was becoming now, someone defined by more than either family neglect or professional achievement. I thought of Rebecca too, still trapped in the pattern our parents had created, unable to build an identity separate from being the favored child who needed constant support. In some ways, the family dynamic had damaged her as much as it had me, just differently. Her meltdown at discovering my financial success had been shocking, but understandable. It had threatened her position as the family's center of gravity. I hoped she would find her way eventually, as I had found mine. Not for our parents' sake, but for her own. That weekend, I made a decision that surprised even me. I anonymously funded a new mental health center at the community college in my hometown, with a focus on family therapy and support for young adults transitioning to independence. It wouldn't fix my family, but it might help others break destructive patterns before they became entrenched across generations. As I signed the paperwork finalizing the donation, I imagined Grandma Helen watching with approval. She had taught me that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the freedom to choose your own path and the courage to walk it, even when it led away from the familiar. The following spring, I received an unexpected email from Rebecca. It was brief, just a few lines. "I'm starting therapy. For real this time. Not because Mom and Dad are pushing it, but because I need to figure out why I keep sabotaging myself. I'm not ready to talk yet, but I wanted you to know." I replied with equal brevity, "I'm proud of you. That takes courage. When you're ready, I'll be here." It was a small step, but a significant one. Whether it would lead to reconciliation remained to be seen, but the mere fact that she had reached out without asking for anything felt like progress. As for me, I was continuing to build a life guided by my own North Star rather than my family's expectations. Michael and I were discussing moving in together. I was mentoring two promising female entrepreneurs. Einstein had mastered the art of fetching, a skill that filled him with disproportionate pride. I had learned that some relationships can't be fixed, they can only be managed with appropriate boundaries. I had discovered that financial success doesn't heal emotional wounds, but it can provide the freedom to address them on your own terms. Most importantly, I had realized that being overlooked as a child didn't mean I had to remain invisible as an adult. One evening, as Michael and I prepared dinner in my kitchen, he asked about the North Star necklace I always wore. It was from my grandmother, I explained, telling him about Grandma Helen and her wisdom. "She sounds remarkable," he said. "I wish I could have met her." "Me too. She would have liked you. What do you think she'd say about how far you've come?" I considered the question, chopping vegetables as I reflected. "I think she'd say I'm finally navigating by my own stars, instead of trying to be seen in someone else's sky." Michael smiled. "That's what I love about you, Morgan. You've faced some real darkness, but you've never lost your light." In that moment, I felt a profound sense of gratitude, not just for the financial freedom that had allowed me to rebuild my life on my own terms, but for the journey itself. Every overlooked achievement, every dismissive comment, every lonely moment had led me here, to this place of hard-won peace. The $15 million hadn't changed who I was. It had simply given me the freedom to become who I was always meant to be. And in the end, that was a fortune beyond measure. Have you ever felt overlooked in your family, or other important relationships? How did you handle it? I'd love to hear your stories in the comments below. And if this resonated with you, please hit like and subscribe to support more content like this. Remember, Sometimes the person who sees your true value is yourself, and that recognition can be the beginning of your most authentic life. Thank you for listening to my story, and I wish you the courage to shine your own light, even when others don't see it.